Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for joining us on this second update of the Contextualising Hume project. We've now been excavating on site in the field surrounding Hume Castle for the last 2 weeks, and we actually only have 2 or 3 days left, 2 days left now on site actually, with an aim to be backfilling the trenches on Wednesday. And in terms of what we've been doing and looking at, we'll just get this started up. In terms of what we've been looking at in the project and the excavations, we've had 3 trenches opened up so far. Now, this image that you can see here is this is an image that was produced by Historic Environment Scotland following some drone survey work that they carried out in the castle and the surrounding area, or the surrounding fields. So the Hume Castle Preservation Trust own, I'll sort of trace around it with the cursor, as you can see, they own all of these fields immediately surrounding the castle. And in terms of what land is scheduled monument, the majority of what the trust own is scheduled. So all of this area around here, and then it comes along. The only bit that the trust own that isn't scheduled is this small triangle of land down at the bottom. And then there's a little bit of scheduled monument that is not owned by the trust, and that just sort of protrudes into the fields to the west of those owned by the trust. Now, in terms of what the drone survey showed up, you should be able to see, well, one thing you can see quite a lot of is these sort of ploughing marks, some of it much older, down in this corner of the fields, probably more sort of rig and furrow medieval style farming practices. But what's interesting is on the majority of the sort of outcrop areas, the higher ground, there's very little evidence of agricultural working of the land, and most of it's been left over to sort of pasture and sheep pasture for quite a long time. So the advantage of that being that a lot of the remains of the medieval village that used to surround the castle is actually still very well preserved. And you can see in this image some of the things that the drone survey started to pick up. So they were able to identify sort of lumps and bumps in the ground that wouldn't be visible to the naked eye, and were able to characterize them as different structures and buildings. So to the west of the castle, what you can actually see is a really nice linear routeway or trackway that potentially used to lead up to the castle from a sort of west to easterly direction. You can see a couple of buildings or outlines of buildings here, sort of circling around on either side of this routeway. And then down on the south side, there's a lot of enclosures or potential enclosures. On the north side here, you can also see some depressions and remnants of walls up here, which particularly here opposite the existing line of houses in the village, you can see 1, 2, 3, and a 4th and possibly a 5th structure all along the northern side of the castle. Now, where we've been excavating, we've been looking at 3 different areas. So the first area, Trench 1, that we'll look at in a second, is investigating the remains of this potential building here, this rectangular building. Trench 2 is on the north side of the castle. Down here, it's a bit harder to see, but in this area here, there's the remains, another rectangular structure that we're looking at. And so far we've put in an extra test pit, and we were looking around the eastern side of the castle here for some possible banking, or whether there was any defences or ramparts that related to the castle. So what we'll do, we'll have a quick look at Trench 1 to update you what's going on there. So as I say, Trench 1 is actually looking at this structure here, and the image you're about to, that I've just shown you, what you're going to see is that is an image looking pretty much to the south. So the castle, if you were taking this picture, the castle would be behind you to your left. And we positioned this trench to try to identify what the building was, the size of it, what it was made, how the sort of construction techniques, and to try and work out what the function of this building was. Now, in the background here, you can see this is the sort of trackway, the routeway that would have led up to the castle. On the opposite side of that trackway, you've got a platform with the remains of another potential building. We're looking at this one on this side in the hope, or the working theory being that it is a possible gatehouse or tower that would have been functioned as part of the entranceway up to the castle, the original medieval castle. Now, this image was taken fairly early on in the excavation, after the removal of all the turf and all the topsoil, and straight away you can start to see that we were coming down onto some sort of stony deposits, and there were, you know, the topography of this area of the land, you know, showed that there was higher bits that we were investigating, but sometimes the topsoil, turf and topsoil, came down onto less stony areas. So initially we were thinking, okay, it's not too bad. It looks like we've got a little bit of rubble here and there, but what we thought were the starts of some walls here. We thought we had the remains of an L-shaped wall, if you can see the cursor moving through that, and then the remains of a possibly larger, more substantial wall here on the opposite side of the trench. What we actually found was, when we started removing this deposit beneath the topsoil, is that a lot more stones started to appear, a lot more collapse, a lot more tumble. Now, this image, this isn't the highest quality image, but this is not on due to the fact that Brian Turnbull from the village, who's been doing some great drone photography for us, it's got nothing to do with his abilities or his kit. It's just the fact that I took a photograph of a printout that he had done. So we've not got the digital copy yet, but we'll be able to get some more sort of higher resolution images. But you can see, after we started removing the next layers, a lot of stones started to come up, but you can also see the contrast in some of the soils as well. So this sort of L shape that I was identifying before for you, some paler coloured or more orangey red deposits within that stone material there. Also evident up here in the corner and part of this bigger wall. And as we removed all of those deposits, you can now see a lot more tumbled stone than we initially thought. And so there's good things and bad things to that. The good thing being that it shows, I think, that the building itself was possibly quite substantial and built from a lot of stone was used in the building of this structure. The disadvantage is obviously that we have to then clean up, identify, record by drawing, by photography, all of these tumbled stones before we can remove them and get into the deposits beneath. But here you should start to be able to see again this sort of more prominent, this L shape coming through the wall there, and the remains of this larger wall to the left. What we weren't sure of, you know, the drone footage showed a building that potentially continued along in this direction as far as around about here, where the cursor shows, coming back across and then sweeping back up in this direction. And the drone footage material was interpreted as being a large rectangular building with an internal dividing wall around about halfway across. But what we're actually finding is that it's a bit more complex than that. There's a bit more to it, and it's potentially a large building with internal rooms or different structures within it, or it could even be that there's a sort of exterior sort of curtain wall, if you like, that leads you into an outdoor courtyard or outdoor walkway, which you would follow through to then get into these internal buildings. This image here shows more from above the larger wall. This is on the sort of southern side, but you can start to see the stones on the right here. You can see this would have been the face of the wall here, and we believe that all of this stonework down on the right hand side is actually tumbled or collapsed material that would have been part of this wall originally. But you can see the color contrast here as well. This sort of paler, more orangey colored stuff. It's a really compact clay. So what we think is that that's actually the sort of building material, the sort of matrix, if you like, holding all of these stones together, and potentially quite a wide wall. I mean, this stick here, this ranging pole, is 1 meter wide, and we've got one face of the wall here, but we don't have this is, we believe, would be the internal face. We don't have the exterior face. So you're talking quite substantially thick walls up here. And I imagine, I guess it kind of ties into the idea of it being, if this is a gatehouse or an entranceway, leading up to the original, so it's going to be quite an imposing building, you would think. In terms of the other wall, it's not the most clear on this image, but on the opposite side of the trench, this here is this L shape remains, and you should be able to see again the paler, more orangey colored clay-like deposits within the stones, which would have been part of the wall material. We also think some of that, as it's collapsed and eroded away, some of that is slumped down and has washed down into other parts of the trench. But we're now starting to, we don't have an image of it yet because we're only getting there this afternoon, but we're now starting to be able to see where the facing of this L-shaped wall is. So say, for instance, if you were walking up to the castle in medieval times, you might have been walking up that trackway, which is off to our right, and then you would potentially be you'd be walking up the trackway, turning left and entering into this space here, which you would then possibly be brought around to get into this building somehow. We don't know where the entrance to this building would have been. We've only caught the sort of corner, the corner of it. But you can start to see, this is, we believe, the interior of the building, and you can start to see the interior face of this wall here. And we're also starting to reveal the exterior face of the wall, which is just coming through underneath some of this tumbled material up there. So what we have on the interior space, we're starting to also reveal the floor. One of these big flat stones would have been part of the flooring material. And in terms of how that looks from the opposite side, this might give you a slightly better image of it. You should hopefully be able to see this L shape coming around. Again, it's quite tricky because of all the tumbled material. This is before we started to remove some of that tumbled material and get it cleaned up a bit more. But in terms of what it starts to look like, so that as I say, we have to draw everything in before we can remove anything. This area, this is the L shape wall coming around. Now, we don't have this face yet. We've not been able to draw that in, but this is the interior face of the L-shaped wall. The stones that we mark them with a sort of double line thickness to show the wall face coming along up and around here. And then these stones in here are part of the floor that was starting to appear. And then we believe we've got the exterior face starting to appear in this area. And then you can take my word for it, it's turning the corner, and we're going to have we're starting to get the face of the wall coming along here as well. In terms of the much larger wall, we've not fully recorded that yet, but it sort of follows along and around in this shape there. You can also see up in this top corner, we believe, another wall face. So there's potentially another little room or structure off to the northeast part of this building that we've been looking at. So really from the drone footage identifying a sort of rectangular building with an internal division, two-roomed rectangular building. There's actually quite a lot more going on in there than we first thought. So in Trench 1, the next couple of days, what we're going to be doing is exposing this floor space that we've uncovered in the corner and trying to identify the exterior face of this L-shaped wall in there. In terms of finds, very little compared to Trench 2 that we're going to have a look at in a second, but about 35 artifacts have come up so far, but mostly still just small fragments of glazed ceramic, some fragments of glass, quite a few clay pipe stems. Crucially, nothing medieval yet has come out of this trench, but because we're still in these sort of rubbly, tumbled deposits, we're not quite into the more intact deposits. But once we start investigating this floor surface here, we might actually start to reveal a few more interesting objects. Not that what we have found so far isn't interesting, it's just not as it's not quite of the date that we were expecting from this building. But what's interesting with this building is, I think, the size of it, the construction. It is very significant, thick walls, a lot of stone being used. So potentially an important building. And given the position and the sort of location on the way up to the castle, that all ties into our belief or theory that it is some sort of gatehouse or entrance tower to the castle. Moving on to Trench 2. So Trench 2 is located, just to remind you, looking at this building down here in the north side of the castle, northeast corner pretty much. It's at the bottom of quite a steep slope running from the castle down to the north, and the drone footage suggested a building with a small enclosure or structure off to the southern side of it. In terms of what we've uncovered, so again, the drone, Brian very kindly took some photos for us in the first few days that we were out there, after the topsoil had been removed, and we started to remove the deposits in one half of the trench. So this is the area with all the stones. That's the northern half of the trench as we look at it. And straight away you can start to see, it's actually amazing what you can see from overhead as opposed to sort of on the ground with a more oblique angle. But you can start to see with the stones here, particularly from the top left corner running down the way, a probable wall coming in that direction. And then these much larger stones are appearing to indicate a sort of linear wall coming along in an east to west fashion. So what we believe, and you'll hopefully see this in the next images as well, is that we've come down onto part of the house or part of the building that we were looking for. And then we believe that this wall here may be the little enclosure that's sort of protruding from it to the south. This photo was just taken this morning, I believe, actually. So this is a slightly oblique angle taken from the southwest. So the castle is directly behind us as we're looking at this image. And you can see again, that was the wall running from the corner on the last image. And actually you can see it continuing along in this direction, and it shoots along to the opposite corner of the trench. And we've got the larger wall that we believe is the part of the building itself, potentially of the house, running up here. And what you can see here is the contrast in colors as well. We believe that this area of the trench is the interior of the building, possibly a house, and you can see a much paler color soils compared to those on what we believe to be the exterior down in this half of the trench here. A slightly different angle again, and again you can see that color contrast. So we've got the paler soils and these larger stones coming through in this area, and the possible enclosure wall skirting around in in a sort of semicircular fashion from the top right of the trench as we look at it down to the bottom left. And here's looking at that curving wall. It should give you a slightly better angle of it. So the running from one corner of the trench, curving away and moving to the opposite corner over there. Interestingly, though, what we also found was which we weren't expecting, if we go back a couple of slides. So the castle is way off to the left up the hill, but right in this southwest corner of the trench, we've had these very, very large stones appearing as well. Initially, we thought they might be bedrock starting to poke out, but there is a line of 1, 2, and there's a third one in here. And it suggests possibly, you can see here, a nice line of stones coming along, possibly a more substantial wall. Now, we don't know whether it's part of a building or whether it's maybe some sort of retaining wall, because, you know, we're at the bottom of a significant slope. So whether it was a big wall to try and prevent too much tumble coming down at some point, we're not quite sure yet. And unfortunately, it's right in the corner of the trench, so we can't actually extend to try to identify what that may or may not have been. And again, in terms of the drawing, this should give you a bit of an idea, a bit more of an idea of what we've got going on. A lot of stones again, but we're starting to be able to remove some of these, now they've been drawn in, some of these tumbled stones, and it starts to reveal this wall in more detail, and then the potential wall of the house itself in this area here. Compared to the structure in Trench 1, from Trench 2, we've had over 200 artifacts so far from Trench 2, and the majority of them are either broken crockery, fragments of broken glass, a lot more domestic in nature, which sort of ties into our theory of this being a possible house. The majority of it is 19th century, 18th or 19th century, which is not to be unexpected, because some of the houses around the castle would have been occupied in the 1700s, possibly even into the 1800s. And so it's not unexpected to be finding that sort of material. We haven't found a huge amount of earlier material, but just yesterday there was what we believed to be a coin initially, on first glance, was retrieved from the wall material over here. I'll show you it in a second, but on closer inspection, we thought it might actually be a jeton or a jeton, so which would have been a medieval token counter used in keeping accounts, basically. So rather than an abacus or something like that, there would be little tokens that were used mainly for to keep track of rental payments and things like that. And that suggests a probably late medieval date. So there is medieval material in this part of the site, but we're just, again, we're still there's still a lot of the sort of tumbly material to remove until we get down into the more intact deposits underneath. In terms of the third area that we've been excavating, it is located, a smaller test pit has been located on this area of the site, looking at possible banking material and whether that was some form of defense or rampart for the castle. Now, on opening up this trench, we found a lot, again, surprisingly, a lot of stones, and what possibly looked like some form of linear arrangement along here. And you can see there was a lot more stone. This is the castle is directly ahead of us if you were looking straight up the slope. The majority of the stones are at the top end of the trench, and very little was found beyond this area here. So what we were wondering is whether there was actually some sort of wall coming across, whether it had been a little terrace wall, potentially even. But as we started recording and removing, these are the stones we thought may have been the wall But what we actually found is the way all of the stones were lying, they probably have just tumbled, literally tumbled down to the hill and eventually came to a stop. What you can see here is this is all the bedrock, or the start of the bedrock outcropping underneath. Interestingly, there was only 2 artifacts retrieved from this excavation area, and both of them were sort of 19th century ceramics, and both were from the topsoil. There was absolutely no artifacts retrieved whatsoever from amongst the stones, or indeed from underneath them. So it does appear to be a more sterile sort of area of the site. There is, the large amount of stones, it could very well be that a lot of these stones may have formed part of the original castle structure itself, and after it had been destroyed, they've just tumbled down, and this is where they came to rest, and they just happened to fall into a vaguely linear fashion that tricked us into thinking they were a wall for a short period of time. But unfortunately, there's no evidence of any banking or indeed any rampart or defensive structures in this part of the site. So that is a sort of update in terms of where we're at, what we've achieved. We've got a bit more investigations to do over the next couple of days. We've got some more recording to do, some more drawings to finish off, and some little exploratory excavations into the different areas that we've uncovered. So we're going to be looking at the internal spaces of the buildings, particularly in Trench 1, to try to identify intact floor deposits. And in Trench 2, we're going to be looking to try to identify, again, internal spaces of a potential house, and what the external space, whether it's a little enclosure, what it may have been used for. And I did promise to show you the little token that we found. Now, I'm not sure how good the camera on my iPad is going to be, so I'll hold it up there, but we've got, I don't know if you can see a little cross in the middle of it there. It's very thin, probably copper, not very clear, very, very worn out on the other side. But on one side, I believe it's the same side that's got the cross in the middle, you can read the letters FRAN around the edge. And so, yeah, we believe it's a token, a jeton, that we have not been able to find a direct parallel to say exactly what period it dated from, but they were mainly in use in the late medieval period. They still got used beyond that, into the post-medieval period, but they were mostly used prior to Arabic numerals, or numbers as we now use. Prior to them being introduced and becoming commonplace, these tokens were used in accountancy, really, and sort of rental works to keep track of everything. So whether this is was dropped out of the pocket of the Hume Castle resident accountant, we're not quite sure, but we may find other ones. So yes, and then we do have, as I say, we've got a lot more other finds that we've uncovered. We've just not been in a position to get them cleaned up yet, to have a proper look at. So that will be one of the next phases after we finish the excavation on Wednesday. So that's your update. And if anybody has any questions or would like to have a bit more information, I'll do my best to answer them. So feel free to raise your hand physically or digitally, and then we'll just go around and see what anybody has to ask. Charles, yeah.
Hi there. Thanks, Ian, very much for that. And I'm sorry that I joined a few minutes late, but I don't think maybe I missed anything. Going back to Trench 1,
yeah.
Am I right in thinking that because of its position to the left of the main gate, perhaps where vehicular access came through, this was a pedestrian access, which was normally closed at night especially, where people would pass through through the gate guard, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And so is that what we're talking about? Sorry.
Potentially, I think, yeah, because it's hard to see from the, I'll see if I can get some of the images up again. It's hard to see from the images, but this may be the best one to view it on. If this is the entrance, the routeway, the trackway up to the castle runs along the top of this image from right to left as you look at it. So the castle is up to our left. This large wall here seems to, there does seem to be a break in it, or so whether there's a little entranceway or something in this part of the trench. So yeah, I think that's quite a good idea, that actually, Charles, with pedestrians sort of being funneled into this area and then processed through this building effectively to gain access up to the castle. Because if we look at the overhead here, I think the natural way in, if you've walked up here and then you get to these buildings, would probably be to come into the left and then up and around. The other option is that routeway continued all the way up to the southwest corner of the castle, but you may have had to to be allowed access, at least to state your reasons. And this may have been where that was happening. Yeah, absolutely.
And would there be, if you go back to the slide again, would there be a significance to that curved on the other trench photograph, a very sort of obvious looking curve, but that might be just a coincidental tumble.
Yes,
it does seem to suggest there's a curved, the center of the top.
Yeah,
that does look yes, quite intentional.
Yeah.
And so are we thinking, or are you thinking that top line of wall is part of the main gate, and for some reason that circular bit is part of the first, I don't know, a curved wall of the gate?
Yeah, I think it's possible, like a gate post or something like that. Yeah, because I think when it was being excavated, that it started to appear curving, and it's really telling that there was no other stones on the interior of that.
Right.
They were quite clearly in this curving nature, and then these stones here have tumbled away from the edge. So we are, that's what we're thinking, is that it is potentially a little, a sort of rounded end to the wall, if you like, and if that was an entranceway into the building, then that would be quite whether it was part of a gate that extended across the trackway. That's unfortunately something we're not able to say, but that doesn't mean to say that it couldn't have been.
Right. Can I now go to trench 2?
Yes.
Sorry, that's my supper almost ready. Sorry, darling, for not being able to help. Yes, if we go to trench 2, just a question here. There seems to be a not necessarily obvious in that photograph, but there was definitely a curve to the building wall that you were pointing out. Oh yes, well you could just see it there, moving from top right, curving towards bottom left.
Yes.
Is there any significance historically for a curve of that nature in a building?
Not that I know of, and I think it depends on what we're not sure is whether this is a building, or whether this is a sort of something tacked on to a building. So a little enclosure wall appended to the building that would have been off to the left of this image as you look at it. I think that the nature of the soils that we're finding so far appear to be, they're much richer, browner deposits. So whether it could be a little, you could have had a little kitchen garden or something potentially off to the side of the building. Equally, it could have been used for housing animals. But what's interesting is the nature of how it has been constructed. It's very, very tightly packed stones within it. The other option we were wondering is whether there was a little platform up in the top corner of the trench as you look at it here, just because they were quite consistently packed and not flat, but it could have been a platform for something. Equally, this is potentially an area of the site that has been used and worked for hundreds of years, and you may have found little changes that have happened here and there. So it could be that the building itself off to the left was here, and this was added on after. Or equally, this could be something that is older, and then a building just happened to be built off to the left of it at a later date. So it's still early days to be able to determine exactly what the nature of this is at the moment. And
my penultimate question, and then I promise you I'll let other people have a word in. On the right-hand corner, which is not in this shot, but in the right-hand corner, which is closest to the slope going up to the castle, that's it. Could these be stone steps?
Potentially. I think it's hard to know with only having a couple uncovered. But I think in terms of where they are, it's probably worth a look at the overhead, the drone footage. If you can see, so the building that we're looking for is up here, and then there's this sort of has been interpreted as banking material or something coming along here. This is quite a large sort of semicircular depression, and some of those stones may be at the base of that. So it's whether it's actually something to do with that, whether there actually may be some wall or some defensive material, because you can see a ridge running down the slope to join up to where potentially those stones would be. So what's hard to say is it's hard to make too many suppositions from it just with the 2 to 3 stones that we've uncovered, but it's potentially part of a larger sort of feature, if you like, of the castle landscape.
Thank you. And my very last one is going back to your Facebook photograph, which I think that was shared on our Facebook group today. Someone was clearing away a very horizontal stone.
Yes.
I couldn't tell from the picture, from the video, whether there was some sort of square patterns on the stone, or whether it was shadow from the orange plastic netting around the photograph. So I got excited thinking, oh well, is that some kind of tiling from the floor? But you haven't mentioned it so far, so I'm ready to be disappointed.
Yeah, I'm afraid you were right with the first guess at the shadow from the orange fencing around the trench. So, but in terms of where that stone has been uncovered, it's in trench 1, and it's underneath these tumbled stones here. And so once they were removed, it revealed at the same height as this large flat stone. So it's quite nice red sandstone, and so we believe it's part of a stone, a nice flat stone floor that we should have a bit more of revealed tomorrow. So we'll be getting some more photos of that up online tomorrow as well.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
No problem.
Ian, it's John.
Hi, John.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I know you cannot see me. Ian, I've just got a question. It may be a difficult one, but we'll have a go.
Okay.
Well, let's look at trench 1.
Yep.
And you were talking about the red composite, which you thought, well, I take it you thought was possibly like a bonding clay.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Now, in the stone, to keep the stones together, can you, if you think this is so, can you give a rough date when that was the sort of way you built walls and houses?
Not off the top of my head, but yes, I think it's something we can be looking at to try to determine when those, where else those techniques have been used, and what period it would date to. Yes, definitely, it'll definitely be something we'll be looking at.
Right, that would be interesting. And the other thing is there evidence of that sort of clay anywhere else around the castle? Is it common?
It's hard to know because, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any excavation work done previously, so I don't know what whether there was whether it was used in other areas or other structures around the castle. In terms of where it's being sourced from, I'm also not sure what the local sort of clay sources would be like. So I can't answer that one directly, I'm afraid.
No, that's why I said it may be a difficult one. But I think that actually would be interesting to try and date things.
Yes, yeah.
When we talked about the remains in Trench 2, and we're looking at, you said most of the objects were probably 19th century, 18th, 19th century, were then, as we talked about, were overlapping with the actual houses that are in present-day Hume.
Yes.
So we could have actually people living in those houses and also people living and working in what is now not there.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And I think
that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think some of the mapping evidence indicates that there were houses, not just the main street of what is now Hume. There were definitely other houses up until the late 1700s and possibly into the 1800s. So there definitely would have been an overlap in terms of people living in the houses that are currently there and the houses that would have been surrounding the castle. Definitely,
yeah. That's interesting. Okay, thank you. I'll let somebody else have a go.
No problem.
Thanks, Ian.
Anybody else? Yes, Charles.
Just butt in yet again.
Yeah.
Alison, please.
Yeah, just interested because the actual stones look like rubble infill as opposed to anything constructed. Or I'm just interested if you're finding lime between them, which has actually been worked, or if it's just loose soil, because obviously if it's limed, it's a structure which has been formed, built. It should be whiter and it should have certain aggregate mixed in with it. Should put, indicating a building, or is it just rubble? But it does look like rubble infill, like you get an infill rather than ashlar on the outside. You've got that rubble floor. But what will be interesting is you get down a level further, see if you've got any chamfer stops or anything actual worked stone which would date the building, because I'm sure but most maybe others don't. But the actual building of a castle, at the bottom of the doors, the chamfer stops are carved in a different way according to different centuries. So for 12th or 13th century, you get a particular little design at the time of Edward I, for example, that you wouldn't get later, or, so this is the kind of thing that would be exciting to date it, and obviously to see what standard of building it was, if there's any ashlar comes up or any window mullions or anything like that,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the one thing, we're thinking this is quite a sizable building. But yeah, there's no lime bonding that's come up so far, and as you say, the facing stones of the walls that we've been able to identify so far, they're not nicely cut or dressed stones. Really, so it's very it's an impressive building, but it's not a monumentally impressive building, in that regard.
It looks like it's the inside. Look like you're saying about the service buildings that could be outside a castle, that kind of style, rather than what you'd get once you penetrate a very solid defensive structure of a
Yeah.
castle, which is ashlar. You then get through to the rubble infill, and you're talking about several feet by then. This looks more like you know, in the Welsh buildings that I work with, a lot of buildings are often found outside of a castle, which is the service buildings and so on, or it could be stables, or it could be just, you know, more meager sort of settlements or something. So maybe that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and the other thing with the, even in Trench 1, where, you know, we're theorizing that it's to, you know, it's an entrance or on the lead up to the medieval castle, but it's also feasible that this is something that was then after the destruction of the castle. You know, this may have been taken on and reused as a domestic building, or as another building, you know, for a couple of hundred years after that. And the material that's been, the artifactual material that we've found in there so far is, you know, similar to sort of 18th, 19th century in date as well. So it's, you know, we're trying to identify medieval remains, but there's all possibility that these buildings were used in one way, shape, or form up until the 1800s. Yeah.
It's exciting because if you look at other castles contemporary of the time, you tend to think everything just stopped with the Civil War and when it was smashed up. But actually, quite often you've got people dwelling in a castle using the shell or whatever right up to Victorian or almost contemporary times, and then recycling what they find. You probably find remnants of it all around Hume and the other buildings that exist now. But it would also be interesting, as the other gentleman said, to see where could the stone have been sourced from. Is it native? Is it actually from that vicinity, or is there a quarry somewhere maybe 5 or 6 miles away? You know, some evidence of a quarry where it may have been taken from, or, you know, you can always look at those sort of things as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a quarry just the other side of the main street in Hume, where I think a lot of the material will have come from. But absolutely, with what you're saying, the sort of recycling nature, I think that the majority of that stone from these buildings has been robbed out and you know, used to build the boundary walls in the area, and possibly to build some of the later houses as well. So yeah, absolutely, it's very interesting, very good point in terms of this, you know, this notion that a site dies effectively once it's destroyed, you know, but it's probably has been reused in several different ways. Yeah,
we tend to think that Cromwell did everything, and quite often it's the later centuries where people are pinching things through the night and sticking the cutting the stone off. It's usually what happens.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that briefing. That's really exciting, and look forward to seeing the progression.
No, it's great. Thank you for joining. Yeah.
I'm sure I read somewhere, but I can't remember where I read it. Where I read it was that up to about 500 people might have lived in the community of Hume at some point. I mean, have you read this at all? Have I made it up?
I don't think you've made it up, Charles. No, I think it's I can't remember the source of that, but it was definitely a much larger village than it is now. You know, and there would have been a significant number of people there. And I think just the fact, you know, the buildings that have been lost, and there's also, you know, the area beyond the castle, running down to the west towards the former church, the building or the land to the north of the current sort of main street of Hume, there seems to be evidence of other structures up and around there as well. So I think it was a larger functioning village. And you know, if you've got a castle there, you're going to have, you know, a sort of a habitation around it. When it was functioning, when it was in use as a you know, as a sort of functioning castle. So yeah, I don't know the source material for that, but it was definitely a much larger settlement. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Really interesting. Have you,
Charles? It's John Nichols here. Can you hear me?
Hi, John. Yes, I can. I don't know whether Ian can.
Yeah. No. Are you still there, John?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I am. I'm afraid it's so unstable. I'm just getting the odd sentence here and there. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's John here.
Hello, John.
The odd sentence throughout this, it's been very, very tantalizing and frustrating, but like Nancy and John, I'm lucky enough to live here, so I can go every day and get an update. So I'm lucky that way. But this evening, but I just wanted to ask one question. The glass that you found by the entrance building with
Sorry, John, we've lost you there.
Hello. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Hello.
you were, if I think you might be asking about
I was wondering. Hello.
Hi, John.
Is he bringing the in then?
Can you definitely confirm that the glass fragments you found there are medieval or are they part of the later building you think was growing up there? Because if they're medieval, how significant is that about the status of the building and maybe the person who was sitting in there, a cleric maybe who was literate and who was writing down the names of all the visitors who should be coming or those who shouldn't be coming, and he would want a bit of comfort. So, but how common would it be to have a window in such a building at that period, if it is the medieval one?
Yeah, I think so far, I think the glass that you're referring to, so we found a few fragments of very thin glass with a sort of greenish hue to it. It appears to be window glass, but I'm not sure at this stage in terms of what date. I wouldn't hang my hat on it being medieval in date. I think it's probably much more recent, but it's tricky to know necessarily why it got where it was, but we also have to bear in mind that the site was used during the Second World War, and so there's possibly also material that's been deposited in there, and it was those bits of window glass were actually quite high up in the sort of topsoily material, so they're probably later and not necessarily related to the sort of earlier medieval or potentially medieval structures or habitation at the time. That's not to say that we wouldn't find some lower down, but at this stage I don't think we can say that it's medieval glass. No.
Such a mixture to sort through. Can I, if I'm still audible and I don't disappear, can I just pay tribute to Ian and his team? Because apart from being absolutely amazed this week by the skill and the knowledge that they have, they just take it for granted because they've worked on so many sites. But to see and hear the explanations and see how they're able to sort rubble from established building remains, and how they can see soil textures indicating this and that. It's quite amazing, and they've also been very, very personable to the visitors who've come. They've been patient and talked and stopped their work and explained it all, which is so important a part of our project here, and involvement and good relations and so on. So they're really the crack team. They're very small in number this week, but they are the people we need there, and I'm really, really impressed with them. So that's something a resident can tell you that the other trustees and interested people might not realize. I'm certain that Ian wouldn't tell you this, but I'm telling you this.
Well, thank you, John. It's very, very, very kind of you to say. Very nice to hear. Thank you.
Absolutely seconded.
Great.
Excellent.
Okay, well, I think what we'll probably do is call a halt to this update. But I just want to thank everybody for joining and for all the questions and theories that you've been suggesting. It's all very useful and helpful in terms of what when we're trying to work out on site what's going on, and you can get a bit blind to things as well. So it's really useful to have the different ideas and different knowledge coming into to what it is, because you can get quite focused in on one thing or one idea, and then all it takes is somebody to say, well, have you thought about this? And it's like, oh yeah, actually that makes more sense than the rabbit warren I was going down. But so yeah, it's great. And I think what we'll do, we're not going to do another update, so to speak, of the excavation, but what we'll do is after a couple of weeks or so where we've had a bit of time to process some of the more of the objects and to pull together the drawings and some of the photographs, we'll put together a sort of online presentation, whether we do it via Zoom again, and then we'll make that available online as well. All of the videos that we've been putting up on Facebook and the Zoom ones as well, we'll do we're going to make available on a YouTube channel, so that'll happen in the next few weeks as well. And we'll still keep updating the project page on Facebook. So we've got another few months left, but once the excavation finishes, there's still a lot more of the project to come, and a lot more engagement that people will be able to get involved with. And I know we've also got the knitted castle is one of the outputs of the project, and that's making nice progress so far, and so we'll keep everything updated with that too. But I just want to say thank you again for joining. And as John pointed out, there's been, even though it's lockdown, there's still been several people who've been out on their daily exercise, and they've been interested and stopped by to have a chat and have a look. So it's been, even though we've not been able to engage with as many people as we would have originally hoped to in this part of the project, we're still able to get a lot of interaction, which has been really, really good, I think, for the locals, and not just residents of Hume, the surrounding borders area, to get a bit more knowledge and understanding of the site. So I think it's been a success, and we've got a couple more days to get through and see what we can find. But as I say, we'll pull together a bigger presentation of everything, and I'll keep everyone informed of when that will be, and hope to see you all at that point in the future.
Sorry to butt in again, but actually it's become stable for the first time now that you're going. But will there be an opportunity for me to see this evening's Zoom meeting? I'd really like to hear and see the pictures that you've been revealing.
So we're gonna this meeting's been recorded, and we'll make it available in the next week or so, once we've got all the videos together.
Thank you very much. You're a very busy man, I know. Thank you for that.
No problem. Okay, well, I think we'll call a halt there. But thanks again, everybody, for joining, and keep, message us, email us, message us on Facebook. We'll get around to answer any questions, or if you've got any thoughts, then just let us know. It's all useful. So and we'll keep you updated, and catch all of you soon.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Good.